But my job there is solely in and around teaching and learning. So how do we take the techie bits and take the tech out of it and make sure that it applies and is relevant to teaching and learning going forward? And that's what we'll aim to show today. If you want to reach me after today, if you want to grab any resources, you can get me at edtech@texthelp.com, or do please follow me on Twitter, th_PatrickM. What I aim to do just at the end of this today is give you access to a dedicated Wakelet board, which we've built just for today's session, which will take you through all of the elements that I've shown you in some depth, because EquatIO is such a brilliant product with so many features. It's very hard to get through in this short time. But that'll give you access to the EquatIO tool. It'll give you access to apply for a pilot. It'll give you access to all of the training and all of the specific areas that we're going to see today as we go through. Couple of things just to mention as we start here and think about how we might frame EquatIO, a digital tool for the maths classroom, and that it goes without saying that we've all shifted our approaches to learning. We've had to over the last number of months. And originally, of course, I would have for the last number of months been talking about remote learning, but I'm going to move today and just talk about digital learning, because the sort of embracing technology is quite obviously here to stay going forward. Whether it's learning inside of the classroom or outside of the classroom, I want to make sure that I show you strategies today that support both of those. So yes, we're talking about tech, but we're talking about strategies that if students have access to a device or internet connectivity, then they can access all of these tools easily and quickly. So thinking about digital learning challenges and thinking about what we might address when we talk about EquatIO in the maths classroom, I want to look at creation. How would you create resources? Assignment. How can we make it easier once you've created those resources to ship them out via something like Google Classroom or even Microsoft Teams if you're a Microsoft school or college? How can we enable students to complete maths tasks easily, giving them the digital tools that they actually need to be able to express maths? How can we provide assessment and feedback really easily and opportunities for that? And actually, most of all for me, how can we create pathways for learning maths and opportunities for learning maths that can build some motivation in our students? And perhaps using digital tools, take away how abstract maths can be and make it more real world, and make it more accessible in the widest sense of that term. So we'll concentrate on those kind of 6 points, and throughout this I'll refer back as we do the demo to each of these as we go through. So a couple of quick things just to frame the EquatIO tool. I think sometimes when we think about maths and we think about remote learning, sometimes we're in danger of looking at past papers and working on our students working under their own steam to answer practice questions or worksheets. And not that there's anything at all wrong with that. Practice is, of course, essential. I'm going to show you some easy ways we can do that digitally as we go forward. But then the other way is many of us may have embraced something like Google Forms. And the challenge with something like Google Forms in the maths classroom is that assessment is much more than that final answer. And if you take a typical quadratic that I've just thrown on the screen there, there's two answers to that quite clearly because it's a quadratic equation. But which one is the right answer, and how would we even go about putting that in a form? And how would we identify where the student perhaps has gone wrong in their methodical working out steps within that? Because we don't get access to it. We're asking them for a direct answer or a multiple choice answer. And so we need to recognize that when we go digital, we need to be able to do more. There's no point just replacing it for replacing one piece of technology for another. We need to be able to do more. One thing that has always been clear to me, looking at maths and looking at how we might do maths on, say, a form online, how we might do maths in a Word document or a Google document, is that it's tough to do. Many of you may well have studied maths as part of your degree and your teacher training. And of course, you may well have learned things like LaTeX at 3rd level to be able to get maths into digital documents. But we don't need to teach another language to our students to help them express maths. Specifically, those students that struggle or those students at a younger age, LaTeX is a bridge too far. So we know that using equation editor or the built-in tools that are in Google Docs or in Microsoft Word, it's hard, it's difficult, it's slow, it's painful. And if we were to ask students to master that, well, for me, that takes away from the maths in a lot of circumstances. We're focusing on the tech rather than the actual maths piece. And so if you think about the same quadratic that I had on earlier, which was digital, And you think about a typical student going to their A4 file block and writing down the original question and then working through the answer of that. And if you were to say to them, right, I want you to make that digital, there's really only one way they can do it, which is they could take a photograph of that actual paper piece and they could send it to you through Google Classroom. And that could be tricky enough to get into a nice workflow. You're not giving them many opportunities to express their maths. They're still sticking to paper. So if you imagine using something like Equation Editor to get that digital, that's just going to be way too much for a student. And it certainly, in my experience, has demotivated them from using digital tools for maths. And so that's where EquatIO comes in. And I just want to highlight a couple of quick things about EquatIO, and then we'll jump right into the demo. But EquatIO from us here at TextHelp, first thing to mention, it's cross-platform. Really important when it comes to digital learning, because we don't know what devices our students are going to have. We don't know if they're going to be on a Chromebook or in the Chrome browser or using Microsoft Word on a Windows machine or using a Mac or using an iPad. We need to be able to provide them the same experience everywhere they go. So EquatIO delivers on that. The other thing that I'll mention just at the bottom of this slide is that this is going to give access for students to maths across multiple different types of formats. So we can now do maths in PDF. So a simple practice worksheet we can complete and fill in using EquatIO. We can use paper. So we can still ask students to write down on paper, but we can now make it digital with EquatIO. Khan Academy videos or any maths video, we can make that accessible, and we can also put that into our documents as well. We can grab maths from a web page, or we can grab maths from images. So if we have a photograph that we've taken of an old worksheet, we can start to make that accessible and start to make it editable. And because we can do all of those things, we can make it easily available for assessment as well. So EquatIO gives our students an extra set of buttons. So those extra set of buttons, which we'll go through in a little bit of detail, and I'll show you how each of them work, is going to give students access to many different ways to put maths into their document. Maybe by handwriting, maybe by speaking, maybe by handwriting on paper. We've supplemented that with things like prediction, which I'll show you. So instead of having to find the superscript function in Word or in Google Docs, or remember the shortcut key for, say, squared, we just start to type SQ, and that'll get us squared. So we're building the language of maths with that as well. We build in things like graphing, and we also give them the ability to draw diagrams and images and put them directly into their documents. And so this is going to work on Google Docs, on Microsoft Word. It's going to work on Google Slides. It's going to work on Sheets. It's going to work on Forms. It's going to work in Classroom. It's going to work in PDFs. So wherever we want to create resources and wherever we want students to complete those resources and answer some questions and work through some problems, we can do that with EquatIO. So we're going to focus in the demo on the 5 things you see on screen: creation, some formative assessment pieces. How do we build a workflow for maths that's workable for our students? How do we provide better feedback on that? And how do we help them complete? So before we look at EquatIO in action, I'm just going to talk you through this toolbar really, really quickly, and then I'll show you how it works. So just so as you know, when I refer to each of these as we click them on a live document, starting from the left-hand side, Equation Editor. That's going to allow me to type maths and have that prediction. So it's like having a maths word processor at your fingertips. We can type maths naturally. We've got Desmos graphing, so we can access the full power of Desmos and put a graph right into a document. We've got handwriting, third one along there, so students can simply write on top of their device. So whether they have something like an iPad, or whether they have a touchscreen Chromebook, or whether they want to write with a stylus or a pen, they have access to that. Dictation will allow us to simply speak in natural maths language into the microphone on a device, and EquatIO is going to turn that into digital typed maths notation. We've got mobile. I'll show you that in action. Take a photograph of handwriting, turns it digital really fast. MathSpace, the one with the blue symbol inside it, that's where we'll be able to draw diagrams and shapes and images and annotations and create a workflow. Screenshot reader, the little square, dotted square, is going to give us accessibility. It's also going to provide us a way to borrow. I'll say borrow because I'm not going to go into copyright on this call. We're going to borrow resources from elsewhere and pop them into our own resources. And then last and definitely not least on the end are our STEM tools. So if there's any chemists on the meet today, we have access to the periodic table of elements. We have access to a molecular viewer, and we also have a full scientific calculator. So those are the buttons that we're going to get yourselves and our students accustomed to, and we're going to take you through those now. We're going to see Google, it's Freudian slip, Google Forms there. So we're going to see how we can use those tools, pop them into Forms. We're going to see how we can use that MathSpace tool to create a full workflow as we go. We're going to throw in a little bit of Google Classroom as we go here as well, because it's then easier to create and assign resources directly out to students. And before I jump into all of the buttons, just to flag up, we'll be looking at EquatIO in 2 different ways. So to save any confusion, we'll be looking at it in Chrome in Google Docs. All of the functions will be exactly the same as you would use in Microsoft Word on the desktop or online, but we'll also be looking at the web app as well. So students can access this without downloading an extension. They can access directly this web app through a Chrome browser, through Firefox, through IE, through any browser they have, and access all the wonderful things we're going to see in and around EquatIO. So there's 2 different ways to look at it, the extension and also the web app. So let's go hands-on. Enough of my talking about slides. I'm sure we could all see slides far enough at this stage. So I'm going to go to a blank document, and I'm going to just maximize this screen so you can all see it. So let's just expand this out a little bit. Okay, so here we go. So this is a blank Google document, and I've already opened just by using the extension at the top here, EquatIO. So it's going to appear down the bottom of my screen. So just at the bottom of the screen, there's all the buttons that we saw on that slide as we talked them through. Now I'm going to change a couple of settings of this, just so as you can see what we can do in EquatIO before we even start. And what I'm going to do is go up the options really quickly, and I'm going to change just for today my maths notation to large, so it comes up in a larger font size. That's really useful for students with visual impairment because we can easily create resources in a snap that have flexible font sizes. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to leave this on. And this is really useful, but it's important for you to know this is prediction for formulas. So let's say I want volume of a sphere, and I don't know that, and I don't necessarily need to remember it as part of the curriculum, but I can start typing some words that will then predict that and give me the volume. If I don't want my students to have access to that, I can very simply just switch that off. Okay, and I can do that centrally as well. So those are the only 2 things I'm going to show you. Lots more in that, but I'm just going to save those 2. So if I go down to the first thing here, which is equation editor, I can move this window up and down, but really quickly, if I wanted to say do some fractions, okay, so I simply need to type 1 over 2, okay, and then I can go and I can type, I want plus, but I maybe don't want to use the symbol, so I'll start typing PL. There's plus, I'll do 1 over 3, okay, and then I can do an equal sign, which I could press the equal sign, or I could start to type equals there. So I'm helping building language of maths. So if I type my maths, that's 1 line. I can do as many lines as I want, okay? And I'm going to go down the bottom, and I'm going to press insert maths. And boom, that goes directly into the document, okay? So now our maths is in the document. Remember, I set that to a large font size. So that is fully accessible. That can be read back by read and write. But also you'll see as I hover over, you'll see the tag that comes up that helps accessibility, but also helps something else. You'll see there that the natural language of maths is prompted when students hover over. So 1/2 plus 1/3 equals. You'll see that in that text box. So that's really useful to build that. So let's just go to a new line here. So let me move down to a new line, and let me type another piece of math. So 4x, and we want squared. So we just start typing SQ, and we'll do plus 4x. Okay, and we'll do minus 4 equals 0. Okay, so we'll go down to the bottom, we'll insert that, and now that maths is inserted directly onto my page. So we've got the ability again to do multiple lines. So for example, on this, so let me just delete that, okay? And let's assume that we wanted to work this out as a quadratic. Well, we need the quadratic formula. So we can go down and we can get the quadratic formula. And then we could go down and then we could start to substitute directly in here. So we could go in and we could go, right, well, I know that's going to be over, okay, so I'm going to go -4 and I need my plus or minus. Oh, and I'm going to need my square root. Okay, so I'll do my square root and I'll need to do 4 squared. I'll do that and I'll minus 4, and I need to show that that's multiplied by 4, and then that's multiplied by 1. So I can keep going through here, and I could finish off this working out as I go. Okay, so at that stage I can now start to insert this directly into my document, so I can literally use it as a word processor as I go. So that's inserting the maths, and if I just slide this window down, you'll see that that's inserted that directly into the document. Let me just close that window. Okay, so you'll see now I have this, but I also have all of the spoken text, and that's fully accessible. Okay, now that is useful in and of itself, of course, but other things that we might have for prediction, if I go over here, things that might be useful to me, that volume I talked about earlier. So we're working on our sphere. So there's volume of a sphere, press enter, and now we have that included. And we could, of course, keep going down and working out an overall volume based on a particular question that has been asked on the document. So look, there's lots of functions in this that we won't have time to go through today, but that's the very basics of Equation Editor. Now, I'm going to show you another few things here just as we go. So we do have handwriting. Okay, so handwriting recognition is there. So this will do multiple lines of maths as well. Now, I'm actually using a mouse just for today. So on purpose, my handwriting is going to be very, very poor. So let me see if I can do an x squared there. So how bad is that handwriting? But think of those students who might struggle from a handwriting perspective. I can do multiple lines of maths here, and I can make this as large as I want. And when I'm done, I just press insert maths. And what's been on the left-hand side of the screen, which is handwritten maths, is now inserted into the document as digital maths. Again, it's fully accessible. Other things we have here, speech input. So for speech input, let me just go to a new line on my document. I'll move this down so you can see it in action. And I'm going to go 1/3 plus 1/2 equals 1/5. And so I can pause and then I can insert the maths. So now I've got yet another way that I can insert maths into a document. So again, here I can do multiple lines of maths if I wanted to show some working out. But also, this is going to ignore what we all have when we speak, our tics. So it's going to ignore ums and ers and ams and buts and all of the things that get in the way as we might hesitate as we think logically through some maths notation. It's just going to pick up the maths. So we're very quickly giving our students a really, really fast way to insert maths. Now, a couple of things that are really useful to know here, things that we don't go through normally. We do have STEM tools. So take that quadratic earlier. We can now have our scientific calculator on a digital device. And as we're typing on the left-hand side, bottom side of your screen, and we're working through that problem, we can use the calculator here now to work this out. So if I need to know what 4 squared is, I can enter that and I can find it and I can add this directly back into the toolbar down the bottom. So I can start to add the numbers in from my calculator. And that's a full scientific calculator, and that's the full Desmos scientific calculator. But also, we've got things like our periodic table of elements. So we can jump in here. We can add that into our equation editor. So if we want copper, you'll see there copper is added in. I just didn't delete that before I did it. So add the equation editor. So we can add that notation in, but we can also jump into Wikipedia and we can have a more of a read about that particular element. And the last thing on this button is this one. So we've got molecular viewer. Okay, so we can take typical substances and we can start to search for those. So I always use caffeine because I'm a huge coffee addict. And now I can start to view the breakdown of those at a molecular level. So I've got some nice chemist tools on here as well. So if I finish off the toolbar, so things we haven't shown you yet, and I really want to get to the point where we can show you these in anger on some documents. But if I go to Graph Editor, I'm going to get a full Desmos experience, full graphing. So for example, if I wanted to do something like a sine wave, it's very easy to do. Y equals sine X, and now I've plotted that, and I could change that, of course, as well. So I can vary those parameters within there, but I could also do something really simple. If I'm not even at the level of sine graphs at all, I could start to put in something very simple. So I could just put in and plot a point on here, and I could change that. X marks the spot. I could also draw lines between plot points. I could import a series of data by copying and pasting from Excel or Google Sheets. So I have full graphing capabilities in here, but I've also got ways that I can go all the way over here. I can change the range. I can change the labels, all of the things that I might be marked down or up on in an exam environment. I have the ability to do that. And if I were to, let me just go back and I'll pop in the sine graph just because it's a little bit more visual for you guys to see through a demo. So I'll just go, let's go with this. Okay. And all I have to do here is press insert graph. And my graph is now going to be in my Google Doc. Now, think about that from a pupil's perspective. They now have the ability to insert a graph. You have the ability to mark that directly. I'm going to show you how to do that in a little second. So I've just resized that. Oop. Okay, so I can resize it because it's just an image, but also I could edit it. So I can go back here, I could click edit, and I could change the range on that if I wanted to see how moving the variables would affect that graph, or I could correct it if I've been marked down on it as well if I'm a student. But I can put this into a Word document, a Google document, a Google form, anything at all. I now have the ability to graph straight away in the digital domain. So a couple of last things here. A really important feature is this one. And lots of people kind of ignore it at times, but Screenshot Reader. So here's a useful example of Screenshot Reader. So see this maths, no matter where this maths comes from, okay? I'm going to take Screenshot Reader and I'm going to draw a box over the maths. Okay, so I'm going to draw a box, and what you're going to hear is this read out loud. Okay, so it's going to read it out in natural language. This makes my maths accessible, but also supports the language of maths. Now, if I were to go somewhere else, like for example, a web page, and I've picked this web page as I always do because it has a wide range of maths, EquatIO is going to find all of the maths within this page. So you'll see here that all of the maths content is highlighted in blue. So let's go with something really simple, and we'll capture it, and you'll hear it read out loud.
8x minus 5.
So now that maths is, so it's accessible, but also builds the language of maths. Something like this, okay? So something a lot more complex. How could we get that read out loud? Well, literally a couple of seconds.
Plus the sum from k equals 1.
So it'll read out all of that, but it has something even better than that. So think about, you have maths content on a web page or on a PDF. You need to capture it because you want to put it into a digital piece to send to your students, okay? Now, as well as playing back maths, we have these three little buttons. So if I want to capture that maths from the web page, it's not accessible, really couldn't copy and paste it, and it'd be really hard to edit it after the fact. I can just press the three buttons. I can go to copy LaTeX, and then I'm going to go right the way back to my document right here. So let's just go down to the bottom, just below McGrath. And what I can do is go down to LaTeX at the bottom, and all I'm going to do is paste. So I've just right-clicked and paste. It's grabbed all of that maths very smartly. It's now created that maths content, and if I just insert it, it's now directly in my document. Okay, so I'm going to close this, and as if by magic, there is my maths there. Now I have this on large font, so it's going to run over the edge of the page at this point. But if I had it at the right size font, it's going to pop it directly in the document. So I can capture maths from anywhere. Here's where else that's useful. You know all those past papers? So something like these past papers. Let me go and let me open up this past paper here, okay? So this is past paper. This is practice GCSE questions. Imagine you wanted to have that question number 3 there, and you wanted to have that in a Google Doc or in a Google form. Well, I can open EquatIO. EquatIO will open. Looks a little bit different on a PDF. Screenshot Reader, same button. Drag over the box. Now,
2 lines, line 1, f of x equals 2x.
So it's going to read it out loud, but remember, what can we do from a PDF? We can copy the LaTeX. We can go back to our document. Remember, this could be a Word document. This could be anything at all. I go to LaTeX. I'm just going to delete the old LaTeX that was in there, okay? And I'm going to just paste that. And if I insert it, it's grabbed the question, it's grabbed the words, and it's grabbed the maths. So if I go back to my document, you'll see here that it's now pasted that directly in. And again, remember, that's in the large font size on purpose just to show you today. So that's grabbed all of it. Now, I could, if I wanted to create a variation on that, now click it, edit maths. No, I don't want this to be squared. I want this to be cubed. So I could edit the maths, and I could now insert the maths. So I could change and edit the maths, or I could simply copy it out. So I create multiple questions based on that one question, practice paper question that I've grabbed from a PDF. And there's another useful feature of that. So if any of you have resources that you have taken some screenshots, some old-fashioned screenshots, where you literally just crop out and pull out a particular question and you've put it in your own digital resources. Challenge with that is it looks like this. So it kind of looks fine, but you can't edit it, and it's certainly not accessible for your students. So what can we do? Well, that magic screenshot reader button down the bottom, and drag the box over it. So that's previously inaccessible maths. I've literally copied it as a screenshot using the snip tool. Now all I need to do is new button, edit with EquatIO. And if I just press insert maths, it's all I've had to do, 2 buttons. You'll find now that I have a second copy of that. But the second copy of that replaces the inaccessible copy. It's fully accessible and it's fully editable. Okay, so last thing on this particular page is possibly one of the more exciting things before we see this in action in another couple of tools. And it's this, it's math space. So let's think about manipulatives and shapes and how we might generate those, put them into resources, and give students access to use them. So if I go insert maths, insert math space, it's going to open up a new window in my browser. It's going to create what is effectively a blank canvas. And if you look at the bottom now, you still have all the same buttons as you would have had before. But what you also have are our shape tools. So I have access to about 200 different shapes here. So I can simply go up, look for the shape I want, and I'm going to pick on one that I talked about earlier, which was a sphere. Okay, so I'm going to look for a sphere. I'm going to be able to draw that really easily. What I might want to do on this is pick up my pen tool. And I think I'll make my pen tool, let's make that blue just for today. So blue, okay. And now what I might want to do is I might want to show what a radius or a diameter happens to be. I might want to mark that in. So I'm doing that with my mouse. You could obviously do it on a touchscreen, but we can start to make really rich documents on here. And if I wanted to give my students a start, I could say, let me see, I could just type some text and I could say, what is the volume where r equals 5? Okay, so we do something simple. We've created the question and we'll insert it directly into the document. And now we need to give students a little bit more help. So we need to give them the actual formula. So we've got this volume of a sphere and we can insert that, because remember the prediction, easy to type. We've given them a reference point. We've been able to create this visual material, and we can then insert that directly into the document. Okay, so now in my document, I now have access to this. And think about this from a student's perspective. When you put these tools in the hands of your students and you're just sending them out a plain old simple Google form, you've now given them all of these tools so they're able to draw and manipulate shapes and annotate. So we've been able to create resources fast, but also help students complete work. And there's a whole range of tools within this. I'm literally only going to look at 3 in the one space. So I'm going to go to my math space and I'm going to show you 2 of our smart tools. So for example, I have, if you're lower on down the school, I have access to my fraction circle here. I can start to change the number of segments really quickly. I can shade it in different directions if I want to flip around the image. I have access to that. So I also have access to fraction bars. I have access to squares. So for example, if I wanted to do how many squares is in this, I could very simply change that because I want a 3x3 grid. And that forms the basis of the image that I want to create. But it also lets students have access to all of these wonderful tools. So from here then, two last things I'll show you. We'll go to my angle measure here. Okay, so there's my angle measure. Let's say we were doing estimation. We wanted to put that in as a 50-degree angle. We could do that. We want to turn off the label. And now we've got an angle that we can ask them to measure. And if students don't want to follow the rules of estimation and don't want to work it out that way, guess what? They've also got access to really cool things here like protractors. So we have a protractor. We can switch it to radians, a pi. We can also switch it left to right, right to left. We can give it a full 360 degree. So we've now given students access to all of these tools. And although this is going to look a little bit messy, for the sake of showing you, I'll press the insert button and you'll see here now that that's going to go right back into our document. So there we go. Okay, so that's all in there. So that would obviously be a structured question or an annotated image. But remember, we could simply ask the question and we give our students access to MathSpace. And because we do that, they can start to draw the diagrams as we go. So let's see this in a couple of different pieces of action. And the first one here is, I think we've got about 15 minutes left. So we're good time. First one is a blank Google form. So if you've been using Google Forms, you've probably started with multiple choice. So here I have something special. I have a Google form, which is just a blank form for today. There's nothing fancy apart from my lovely graphic at the top. But what there is are these blue buttons that you'll see. So these give me access to EquatIO right in my Google form as long as I have it installed. So for example, which is greater? We just want to put in some fractions. Okay, we'll click the blue button. At the bottom, our EquatIO toolbar comes up. And all we want to do there is put in, we'll go back to our 1/2, 1/3 that we did before. Let me show you how quick this is once you know how to use the buttons that we've seen. Okay, so now there is accessible maths. It's the correct notation. Let's do another one. So let's go and delete that. And we'll go 1/3 and we'll insert it. And now we've started to build our form. So let's go down here and let's see how we could use some of those manipulatives. So let's say we were doing fractions. We want to put this as part of the question. So we'll press Insert Maths. And we're going to go here to MathSpace. And we're going to jump right up here. And we're going to say, in this case, actually, I'm going to put a fraction bar, okay? Because I'm just asking them to express this as a fraction. So I'm going to change this. I'm going to put it as an 8. So that's 5/8. And I'm going to now insert it into my Google form. So now I have that manipulative and it's in my Google form. Okay. And I'm going to do this one because I want to be able to show you a quick feature of EquatIO in a second. So I'm going to press Insert Maths and I'm going to go right the way back to MathSpace. And let's say we're working on Pythagoras theorem. Okay. Right angle triangle. We want them to work out the hypotenuse. So we're going to give them a simple representation of that. So we can go down to our shapes. We can draw our right angle triangle. We're going to have to give them the label. And we're going to label that as C. Excuse me. So I'm going to move that across. For clarification for our students, we're going to make sure they know this is a right angle triangle. And I'm just going to draw in the right angle in there. I'm going to pop it in. Now, obviously, we'd label up the sides and stuff. We just don't have time for that today. But when I press Insert, that's going to put it right into the document. Okay, so that's in my Google form. This is what my students is going to see. And of course, I can resize that. Think about graphs. Okay, so press my blue button, go down to the graphs. And now what I'll do is I'll plot that coordinate that I plotted before. Maybe we're just asking them, where is X? Give me the coordinates of X. Insert the graph. And now we have that directly in our Google form. So we've now got the ability to input anything we want directly within here. And the last thing I'll show you, because we won't have time for all the questions on the forms, is remember where we found a question that was on a past paper. So I'm going to take the same functions question. Okay. Now we can insert that now in a Google form really easily, accessible and editable. And here's how we can do it. We simply go up to our PDF, our past paper piece, and let's just see, right, let's go down to, we want question number 5 at this point. So EquatIO is open. Screenshot reader is going to be my best buddy at this stage. I'm going to drag over it. It's just going to do its magic, literally just a couple of seconds and it's done. And I'm going to copy that LaTeX. So just the 3 buttons, copy LaTeX. So guess what? Go back to the form. And I want to insert that question in the form. So all I do is press my blue button, down to LaTeX. I'm going to delete the last thing that was in there. And I just right click and paste. And now that question that was part of a PDF, past paper, inaccessible, not editable, is now in my Google form. Okay, and I could create multiple versions of those. So if you think about it, very quickly, we've got a way to really start to expand out. And we could turn this into a quiz so it automatically marks, because we can use EquatIO to enter the correct answers or variants on the correct answers as well. But let's just see how that looks from a student's perspective. So if we take this, so there's your nice Google form, clear maths notation, manipulatives, images, graphs, practice questions, all in there. But here's one thing we didn't show you. Imagine your students, right? This one's easy. They tick the box. This one, they can start to insert really easily here, and they can go, right, as a student, I'm going to press my EquatIO button, and I want to express that correctly. So I know that that's going to be 5/8. So that's useful. Okay, so we've now got good maths here. Think about this. So we've got multiple lines in Pythagoras' theorem to go through the various steps to work out what C might be. So think of the pupil, the student who likes to write that answer down, that to them it's not very intuitive to press a button on screen and start to type like I did. They could use the handwriting tool, they could use the dictation tool, but we all know that bookwork and being neat and tidy, looking forward to exams, is really important. So this is where a super special feature comes in, which I'm going to show you, okay? And it's this one. It is EquatIO Mobile, okay? Now, EquatIO Mobile will let your students photograph their handwritten work and pop it directly in. Now, how would they actually do that? So this takes a little bit of work just for me to show you exactly how this is going to look to your students. So what I'm going to do is something super fancy, which is where it always goes wrong. And I'm going to mirror my iPhone, and it always goes wrong because most people end up seeing my actual front door. Okay, so 9071. So that all I'm doing here is doing AirPlay from my iPhone. This iPhone does not have any apps installed into it for EquatIO. Nothing needs to be installed, okay? So I'm going to show you what it starts to look like on screen. So if I go here and I'm a student, remember I've written down my handwritten piece of work and I press EquatIO Mobile, up comes this. So let's just go here. There's my lovely dog Charlie in the middle. No Snapchat messages are waiting, which is a good sign. All I'm going to do is open up my camera. Okay, so you can see it's me. We're here, okay, and it's live. I just hover over that QR code with my phone or my iPad, Android phone, iPhone, really doesn't matter, okay? And it's going to go away and it's going to find out as a student, what are my active documents, okay? What documents do you have open on your page? So all I need to do is go, oh, I'm in the EquatIO assessments form, okay? And then I'm going to go to the little camera icon, okay? And then you're going to see, right, we're back on the camera. But what I can do is go all the way over to my printed paper. So I've literally just written this out. And it'll take a photograph of my handwritten work, okay? Not too tidy, not too neat. But if I press the green tick and I press Save as Math, sorry, it's always going to look it's always going to look American when we got that. That's our American colleagues. And now you'll see on the screen, it's taken the handwritten maths, it's made it into digital format. And now if I press the big blue button there, it's going to add that directly into my document. Okay. So with a bit of luck, if I'm in the right form, you'll now see if I move my phone over, all of that maths that was handwritten has now been inserted directly into the document. So we can still support students with writing within there as well. And remember, if I go back to this, what's quite useful is if I connect to my camera, I'll take a photograph of the same maths again just to show you. And I go, yep, that's the one I want. I still have the opportunity to save as image. So it's going to pop it in as an image and not just digitize it. Some pupils prefer that. Sometimes you might prefer that as well. So I'm just going to stop mirroring there before you do see the front door. And now you've given your students lots and lots of ways to input maths on Google Forms. Now, last things in the last 5 minutes that I'll go through here, okay? So we can use this in Forms. We can also still use all of the tools of EquatIO in PDF. If you have read and write in your school or college, I can use all of these tools in EquatIO to allow a student to complete this. So let's look at that super duper duper quickly, okay? So let me look at this and then let me say, right, I need to complete this. So I'm going to go really quickly. So don't judge my maths here. Don't judge my maths here on this one because I'm going to go super quick. I'll go to S. I'll say over T, and this is my super small font size as we go, equals U plus V, okay? And now I can press, and obviously I do multiple lines of that as well. But now I've been able to take this and I've been able to insert it directly into my PDF. There's no magic PDF here. This is any PDF. But now if you send out a past paper or a worksheet that you've downloaded or want to reuse, students have access to all the buttons to create within that. So we're giving them the ability to use all of this everywhere that's possible. So if we move on to the last section when it comes to EquatIO, I just want to look at the very last function, and that is workflow. Okay, so workflow, and then we'll leave you with some of these resources as we go. So if I go to workflow, I'm going to go and I'm going to type this into my browser, EquatIO.TextHelp.com. Now, you've seen this before, which is why it's going to be super quick for us to have a look at today. But I have assignments here. So what this will allow me to do, if I go to the web browser, is create what we call a new space. So think about that as a new question set. Okay, that's probably the easiest way to do it. And all we'll do is, very quickly here, I'm going to do 2 slides, and I'm going to create an estimation piece. So let's just go to something simple. And let's say, for sake of argument, we'll label that up as 1 meter. Okay, so we'll label that up as a 1 meter. So we've got access to this. We're labeling this up as a reference point. And then maybe all we're doing is a quick estimation task. And we're going to put this on again. And we're going to put a number line on. And we're going to make it that big. And our question maybe is estimate the length of this of line B. Okay, so we don't have time to go through this in much detail, so it's going to look a little bit rough. But if I then add a new page, so think of that as the second question. If I add this new page here, okay, I now have another blank canvas for another question. Now, I could use that in a couple of different ways. So one of the ways I like to use this is I like to go to a photograph that I've taken with my phone of a worksheet. Okay, so there's a photograph of a worksheet, literally sitting on my kitchen counter. Take a photograph of the worksheet. I'm able to make it as large as I want on screen. And all I could ask my students to do is to work through on the left-hand side each of the problems on the right-hand side. And remember, they could do this on paper and photograph it and put it in. They could type it out. They could use dictation. They could use handwriting on there. So they've got the ability to do that. And now, I just showed you that as a past or a practice worksheet. I could pull in real images. So if I want to pull in pictures of 20 bananas, I could do that. So I have the ability to create an activity here really easily. So I'm going to give this one a name, and I'm going to say Darlington, because that's who's arranged today. And we're going to talk about workflow in the last couple of seconds, right? So we can share this easily by pressing share. Okay, and we can do a couple of things. We can make a copy for each one of our students, or we can make a copy for each person and expect a response. Expect a response creates the workflow because we're going to ask our students to return it and send it back to us, and then we can jump in and we can start to mark it very, very quickly and easily. So I'll go expect a response, continue, It's going to generate a link. If you're using Microsoft Teams, you'll fill that in there. If you want to use email or you've got an LMS, you could copy that in. I'm going to, for today, just share this out on Google Classroom because it's nice and fast and easy. So I'm going to click Google Classroom, and exactly as you would do, I'm going to click on my particular class. I want to create an assignment. I'm sure you've all been through Google Classroom before, so you're more than familiar with this. We'll not waste some time on the instructions. It's exactly the same, but you'll see our math space is added into the Google Classroom assignment. I'm going to just say at this stage that I only want that sent to me rather than all of my colleagues in Team TextHelp, and I'm going to press assign. Now, what that's done is that's went through Google Classroom. It's created a new assignment. It's sent out the entire math space to my student. So again, that could have been multiple pages or just one page. And the beauty of math space at this stage is if I go back here, the assignment that I have created is under my assignments tab. So it's here. I'll have a notification of how many students have finished that piece of work and responded to me. Okay, so much like the handed in notice on Classroom, I can open that assignment and see how many students have responded. So for example, here's one I did with the team, and it was a very simple task, an estimation task. So now you can see all of the students that have returned that piece of work. And what I could also do within this is I could start to mark that. I'm going to go into this first piece of work, and I'm going to have a look at this piece of work. And I can start to give Jake a score out of 100 or whatever I had set it up for at the outset. I'm going to see when he submitted it. I can give him personal feedback. And when I press the send feedback button, I could send that back to him. I could also annotate directly over the top of this really, really easily. So if I want to put something more personal, I can do that. So look, that's math space, and that's what gives us the capability to have workflow. And remember, we can create a task or a question in any tool that we have at the bottom of the screen. So just to finish off, I'm going to give you access to a set of links. I'm going to remind you before we go, rather than going to play mode here, that all of what you've seen there is going to work on any device because it just works in a browser. It's going to work on an iPad. It's going to answer the questions of how we can create resources, how we can create assessment opportunities, how we can integrate with Google Forms, importantly, how we can equip our students to do maths digitally on devices. So I'm going to leave this one on the screen for you right now. So this is everything you would need to get started with EquatIO. Text.help/more EquatIO. That'll get you to a Wakelet board. Lots of ways to grab the product. Lots of ways to use it, full of training videos that go in much more depth than we would have had time for today. And that will give you a really, really good insight and give you access to the tools really easily. There's lots of ways we can help after this. So if you want a pilot for your school or college, we can get that set up. Don't be afraid to reach out to me directly. But what I'll do, just as we see, if there's any questions in these last few minutes, I'll put this slide, if it's okay with you, Wayne, just hold it on the screen. Oh, so people can take that link down, and hopefully we can send that out to attendees after today. So thank you all for listening. I do appreciate it. That was last night I went on a 15-minute call about EquatIO to Australia, and I came off 2 hours later. There's lots to talk about with EquatIO. So that was the super quick term. So anything you need, give us a shout. And Wayne, thank you for the opportunity, and I hope today has went well for everybody.
Thank you for taking the time out, Paddy. You know, I think that was very, very informative. And I think, as I've mentioned in the chat there, it is mind-blowing what EquatIO can do. And the other TextHelp tools, what they can all do is absolutely mind-blowing. I remember the first time I saw EquatIO 2 years, maybe 2.5 years ago. I was really, really blown away with how powerful the tool is, particularly for well, at all levels, but particularly for our HNC, HND courses that we run here at the college. And as you've demonstrated there, it's almost unlimited, the complexity of the equations that it can manage. And yeah, it's such a powerful tool. So thank you very much. Has anybody got any questions for Paddy before he disappears off?
I always take that 2 ways. It was either really good or really bad. When you have questions, you just never know.
I know. It's always satisfying when at least one person asks a question. But thank you very much.
All righty.
I'll make sure next time we run one of these, I will make sure that you are amongst the first to be invited.
Appreciate that one.
You know, I've been on both presentations there, so I've been tipping between yours, and I'll just stop recording.